Welcome to Marketplace Tech Bytes, our weekly review of the biggest stories making headlines across the industry. I'm Lily Jamali. This week on the show, the FCC is set to vote on restoring net neutrality rules. Google agrees to destroy Incognito Browsing Data as part of a legal settlement, and Jon Stewart reveals that Apple told him not to interview FTC Chair Lina Khan. Helping me to dig into all of that this week is Maria Curi. She covers tech policy at Axios. Welcome to you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, great to have you back. And we're going to start, as always, with our bite of the week. And I'm actually going to kick things off this time. My bite of the week, Maria, is 2. That is the number of seasons the show The Problem with Jon Stewart lasted on Apple TV. It was abruptly canceled last fall over what was termed creative differences, but we learned some of the details about what that means when Stewart had the chair of the Federal Trade Commission on, Lina Khan, on The Daily Show this week. Let's take a listen to that.
I got to tell you, I wanted to have you on a podcast, and Apple asked us not to do it. To have you. They literally said, please don't talk to her. Having nothing to do with what you do for a living. I think they just... I didn't think they cared for you, is what happened. They wouldn't let us do even that dumb thing we just did in the first act on AI. Like, what is that sensitivity? Why are they so afraid to even have these conversations out in the public sphere?
I think it just shows one of the dangers of what happens when you concentrate so much power and so much decision-making in a small number of companies.
Oh my gosh, her face when he said that to her, absolutely priceless. We're going to be talking more about that in just a moment. But Maria, do you have a bite of the week?
Yeah, my bite of the week is 23 million. That's the number of households that are going to lose a really crucial benefit, a $30 a month benefit to pay for their internet bills by the end of the month.
All right, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Really quickly, though, we're going to start with our first story, which is the Federal Communications Commission is talking about taking up net neutrality once again. What is driving this? Why are they doing this right now?
So this is really one of the top agenda items for not just the Biden administration, but Democrats on the Federal Communications Commission. And if you recall, it took a really long time for them to get a Democratic majority. Now that they finally have one with Anna Gomez, everyone expected that this would be a top item.
3 years is what it took. I mean,
yes.
We're at the end of the administration. It's kind of unbelievable when you think about it.
Absolutely. Yes. It really got caught up in the Senate where a lot of lawmakers, weren't really letting nominees through because of this issue of net neutrality and not wanting that to advance forward. And so now that they do have a Democratic majority, they are going to pursue it and they're set to vote on it and pass it by the end of this month. And a lot has changed since the last time they pursued net neutrality. Now California has a net neutrality law on the books. Other states do as well. And so this is a little bit different this time around.
Yeah. And I'll just edit what I said a moment ago. We're at the end of this term of the administration, practically, not the administration necessarily. We'll see in November. So, Maria, who is going to feel the impact of this most if the FCC is able to basically bring net neutrality back?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because if you ask the FCC, they say that they're doing this for consumers, for the benefit of the consumers, whether it's to experience the internet in an open and free way where no website is going to be slower because an internet service provider decides it's going to be slower, where their privacy is more protected, where there's greater national security protections for us and our data and our networks. That's what the FCC would tell you. But in all likelihood, this is going to impact the internet service providers the most and more, on a more near-term basis, because they are going to be under a lot more scrutiny from this federal agency that didn't have as much regulatory power over them before.
Right. And the chair of the FCC, Jessica Rosenworcel, saying it lets the commission serve once again as a strong consumer advocate of an open internet. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is trying to get $6 billion in funding from Congress to basically maintain this internet subsidy program. You mentioned this a moment ago. What is the status of those efforts right now?
Yeah, so just really quickly, these two issues are pretty interrelated, actually, because if you ask the internet companies, the net neutrality proceedings goes directly against what the Biden administration is trying to do to just connect every American online and have them access to the internet. And so they are using that as an argument for why the FCC shouldn't be pursuing net neutrality rules and reclassification under Title II. But basically, the status of that is, lawmakers passed a really key funding mechanism in Congress to get that money out the door and refund this program during the appropriations process last month. And so now it's going to be much harder to get that money out there. And, most people are expecting the funds to dry up by the beginning of May.
Yeah, this is the ACP program. As you say, the money is running out. So an important topic to watch. We're going to move on to our second story of the week, which is Google agreeing to destroy Chrome data gathered from users browsing in incognito mode. There was this big class action on this filed a couple of years ago, and the allegation was that Google didn't make clear what types of data it was collecting in a mode that people thought was private. So let me start by just getting your reaction to some of the reactions here, because we hear Attorney David Boies on behalf of the people in this class action painting this as a big win for consumers. Google saying, even now maintaining this suit was meritless. There's no massive payout, although people can file claims.
Yeah, I thought incognito meant incognito. I mean, just as a consumer, I fully thought nobody was collecting my data on that or knowing which websites I would be going to. So I think it does betray the trust of Americans who are already kind of iffy about, what these big tech companies are doing with our data. And so it's not a good look for Google, who is facing other lawsuits for, monopoly issues. But still, if they're the major player in the space and they're the ones that have most of our data, what they're doing with it, it's all related.
Well, let's talk about what they're doing with it, because the advertising world revolves around cookies, right? What does this mean for online advertising? Do you see big potential impacts there?
Right. So they're going to delete all of this data that they've collected during our browsing during incognito mode, and that means that it can't be used for search, and that it's not going to be available for advertisers. So it does have a big impact in that way. But I think consumer protection would go first.
All right. Well, on to our third and final story. Jon Stewart with his big reveal that Apple, he says, did not want him interviewing Lina Khan, the head of the Federal Trade Commission, big, proponent of antitrust action, and has certainly taken on a number of issues during her tenure. What did you make of this, first and foremost?
I thought that it was pretty wild. I think one of the biggest takeaways of this is that Jon Stewart was able to pivot and go back to Comedy Central because he is Jon Stewart and he is such a staple. He has all this name recognition and he has all this power. But imagine a content creator that is just getting started, just landed a deal with Apple. They don't have the flexibility and the freedom to just simply go somewhere else and then kind of expose what was going on with Apple. I mean, there's YouTube and other social media channels, but certainly not just going to Comedy Central the way that Jon Stewart did. And so, I guess that is also an argument for why having many companies involved and having competition in the streaming space is important. If one decides to moderate content in a way that's harmful or restrictive, you could go to another one, but it's certainly not easy.
Right. Yeah. And I think the bigger point here is, it kind of shines a light on how much this company has moved deeper into content. Once upon a time, Apple was the pipes. They were the distribution system. They were the mode that we took in all of this content. That was basically the system that they controlled. And now there are these really big implications that we're only starting to wrap our minds around as they push deeper into content. You talked about content creators. If you're not a Jon Stewart, maybe you don't get the opportunity to be, on live television and say, hey, this happened to me. Right. He happens to be somebody with a lot of power. And it was kind of interesting seeing him be the newsmaker pretty much during this interview with Lina Khan.
Yeah, classic Jon Stewart. That's him.
That's him. It is. So Apple, of course, is being sued by the Department of Justice, which alleges that the company monopolized the market for smartphones. We covered this on this show just a couple of weeks ago. Does this help prosecutors make their case? Because there is an argument being made to that effect right now. Do you buy that?
I mean, it's not a good look for Apple. If I were the prosecutors right now, I would be taking this as definitely a win for my case. Whether that materially impacts the results of this case, I don't know, but it does not look good for Apple at all.
And Apple, of course, calling that action from the Department of Justice wrong on the facts, and it is vowing to vigorously defend against it. Never a dull moment in your neck of the woods there in Washington, Maria.
Yep.
All right. Maria Curi covers tech policy at Axios. Great to have you back.
Thanks, Lily.
And thanks to all of you for watching Marketplace Tech Bytes Week in Review. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to us if you haven't already. We are at Marketplace APM on YouTube. Daniel Shin produced this episode, and I'm Lily Jamali. This is APM.